Welcome to my top 10 Hitchcock movies of all time. It's not just the top 10 actually, there's a few honourable mentions that I'm also going to show because Hitchcock had so many movies and he only won one Oscar. One, I say. And that was for Rebecca, 1940s Rebecca. Amazing. Also, Hitchcock only ever had one of his actresses that won an award. And that was 1941, the movie Suspicion, and it was Joan Fontaine. So, quite surprising, yet these movies, they really do stand the test of time. Amazing. So I am dressed today to represent the Hitchcock favourite movies of mine. I'm dressed in the style of, say, James Stewart, the 40s, 50s star of Hitchcock movies. There were many others too. Cary Grant, for example, rings a bell. And this is actually my grandpa's jacket from way back in Australia. I would say that this would have to be dated somewhere in the 40s, 50s, might even be older than that. I also discovered this in the pocket. And this is actually a folding your pocket hanky to make a smart pocket hanky. Look at that. Pretty crazy. That's how old that is. So yeah, it's called The Well-Dressed Man, and you fold to suit your pocket. So it looks like you've got a little hanky in there. So there we are. So we've got some props here. We've got the brandy, often used in many Hitchcock movies. The ashtray, because in Hitchcock movies you're allowed to smoke in restaurants and hotels, etc. back in the 40s, 50s. So quite often there was a lot of smoking in his movies. And of course, the 1940s, 50s telephone. Now this is a clue to one of my absolute most favorite movies of Hitchcock. So my top 10 Hitchcock movies of all time is coming up. But right now, these were some that didn't quite make the list. In fact, I have a list of 18 of my favorite movies. So here's 5 of those movies in the top 18 that didn't quite make it to get to the top 10. Starting with 1956, The Wrong Man, starring Henry Fonda and Vera Miles. 1938, The Lady Vanishes, starring Margaret Lockwood, Michael Redgrave, Mae Whitty as Miss Frey. 1935's The 39 Steps, starring Robert Donat and Madeleine Carroll. 1942, Saboteur, with Priscilla Lane, Robert Cummings, and Norman Lloyd. 1943, Shadow of a Doubt, starring Teresa Wright and Joseph Cotton. Honorary mentions, you say? Well, I can give you 3 of them. Here are the 3 honorary mentions that only just missed out on the top 10. I would place this at number 13. 1941 Suspicion, with Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. It is the only time that an Oscar went to an acting award of a movie of Hitchcock's, and Joan Fontaine took it out. The story reads as: a shy young heiress marries a charming gentleman and soon begins to suspect that he is planning to murder her. What I love about this movie, Suspicion, is pretty much just the whole feel of the movie. You think, is he lying or is he not, Cary Grant's character? And he plays it well, understated, but Joan Fontaine is paranoid through the whole movie. And for me, the last scene is a payoff. You're not sure which way it's going to go. So for me, that's why I enjoyed Suspicion so much. Number 12, you say. Number 12. At number 12 is 1940's Rebecca. It's starring Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier, Sir Laurence Olivier. It is the only movie ever to win an Oscar of Alfred Hitchcock's. Mind you, Hitchcock never won a directing award either. It's crazy talk, crazy. Anyway, Joan Fontaine is in this 1 year before she wins the Oscar for Suspicion, and Rebecca is the classic story that is written as a self-conscious bride who is tormented by the memory of her husband's dead first wife. The thing I really like about this is that you never really did know what was going on. If you didn't know the story, which I didn't going into this movie deliberately, you never really know for sure what happened to the previous wife. And the way that it actually unfolds and plays out, I thought it was great. Doesn't quite make my top 10, but it sits there at number 12. At number 11, 1940, Foreign Correspondent. It stars Joel McCrea, Lorraine Day and Herbert Marshall. It reads as follows. On the eve of World War II, a young American reporter tries to expose enemy agents in London. Now, what I liked about this is, for the time, it had some great cinematography. For that time, you saw shots of Amsterdam, you saw windmills through Holland, the Netherlands. It was funny as well. Oh, and the plane crash that they had in it as well towards the end of the movie was really well done. There's a scene and a shot where the camera hones in on the window of the plane, on one of the windows, and just the way that it goes into the plane and then the scene unfolds. It's just so well done, and especially for 1940, it's crazy. So the three movies that missed out on the top 10 were really close to being in the top 10. They were all in 1940 and 1941, all in black and white, of course. Interesting. Well, hello. Top 10, you say? Yes, the top 10. What could they be? Now we come to the top 10 movies of Alfred Hitchcock, in my opinion. Number 10, 1946, Notorious, starring Ingrid Bergman, Cary Grant and Claude Rains. It reads as follows. A trader's daughter is engaged by an American agent to get close to one of her father's Nazi associates. As a deadly plot begins to emerge, her safety is compromised as suspicions arise, with potentially deadly consequences. This movie from 1946, Notorious, often is in top 5 lists of critics of Hitchcock's most famous movies. I mean, it is a romance, spy, typical type of story of the time for the 40s and 50s, particularly the 40s. And it was great to look at. Some lovely cinematography for the time as well. And a decent plot for sure. Really enjoyed the romantic scene towards the end when Cary Grant. Well, I won't give it away. But there is a scene towards the end where he gets quite romantic about it, but also it's also got a bit of mystique to it as well, which all his movies have. Number 9 is 1948's Rope, starring Farley Granger, John Dowell, and James Jimmy Stewart. It reads as follows. 2 young men strangle their inferior classmate, hide his body in their apartment, and invite his friends and family to a dinner party as a means to challenge the perfection of their crime. So this movie is crazy for me. I believe it was the first one to be shot in colour, Technicolor as it was called then, the first one of Hitchcock's movies anyway, back in 1948. And it's basically all just set in the apartment of a New York apartment. It's one room and they move it around a bit with the camera angles, and you can see outside as it turns into the dark, into the nighttime, you see the lights of the city of New York in the background. So that, even that, just seeing as time went by during the whole movie, even that was something that was just so well done and just grabbed my interest. But the point is, they were basically eating food and serving drinks on a table above a dead body, and yeah, trying to get away with it. So Jimmy Stewart for me though, this is the first of a couple of movies of Jimmy Stewart that makes my top 10 list. He is an absolute classic. This is, for me, it's kind of his look, what I'm wearing right now. Love him, I think he's fantastic. Love his voice, like his style, just fantastic actor of the time. But this movie was really different. It was like a stage play, and actually it is a variation of a stage play. And it's just something that just grabs your attention the whole time, in my opinion. And that is Rope. That is my number 9 movie. Number 8, 1959, North by Northwest. This was starring Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint. It reads as follows. A hapless New York advertising executive is mistaken for a government agent by a group of foreign spies and is pursued across the country while he looks for a way to survive. Now this to me is like the old-fashioned Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is still my favorite movie of all time, give or take a Hitchcock film. So Raiders of the Lost Ark for me, amazing. This is kind of like the early Raiders of the Lost Ark in a way. For the time, they did a lot. They're a great scene with the small plane in the crops when it basically sort of attacks Cary Grant's character. I won't give away too much more, but it's an exciting movie. It's great to watch. It's very entertaining. And Cary Grant is good as always too, and he is also featuring quite a lot in my favorite Hitchcock movies. Always good to watch, and it was a fun movie, this one. Number 7, 1956, The Man Who Knew Too Much, starring James Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day. It reads as follows. Hitchcock's second and equally exciting story of the kidnapping of a young girl to keep her family from revealing an assassination plot. Academy Award-winning song, Whatever Will Be, Que sera, sera, whatever will be, the future is ours to see. Que sera, sera. Doris Day's famous song, Que sera, sera, was nominated and it won for Best Song. So finally Hitchcock actually did win something else, but it was a song by Doris Day. Very famous song. That was actually in the movie The Man Who Knew Too Much. This movie for me was a bit of a surprise. Firstly, it showed a family well, a husband and wife taking their son to Morocco. So firstly, it had Morocco, so it had different scenery for Hitchcock. A lot of it was taking place outside. You've got palaces. It just looked a lot different to a lot of his movies. And then when he comes back and there's scenes around the church back in England, and I love those scenes towards the end around the church, and I won't give too much away. But this was a real surprise for me. I really enjoyed this movie, perhaps again because it's Jimmy Stewart, not sure. But that's my number 7 movie, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Number 6, 1963, The Birds, starring Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor. It reads as follows. Chic socialite Melanie Daniels, Tippi Hedren's character, enjoys a passing flirtation with an eligible attorney, which is Rod Taylor's character, in a San Francisco pet shop, and on an impulse follows him to his hometown, bearing a gift of lovebirds. Now, this movie had to be in my top 10. Firstly, I'm a huge fan of horror movies. Love it, think they're a lot of fun. I have read that this was categorized or considered as one of the first best horror movies, quality horror movies. So with the birds swooping down and attacking them in a little town out, I believe it was in Oregon, or it might have been California, Northern California actually, now that I think about it, a little beachside town. And just, you know, it's in color, it looks great, there's some great effects for the time, 1963, and it just was so much fun to watch. When they're stuck in the house and they can hear the birds above them and they're all scared, and you know, there wasn't much dialogue and they didn't need to be. So Hitchcock just filmed it in a way that the tension was there without having to say too much. I mean, they're birds sweeping down and attacking you, so what else do you need to say? But anyway, a lot of fun. The number 6 movie, The Birds. Number 5, 1951, Strangers on a Train. Starring Farley Granger, Robert Walker and Ruth Roman. It reads as follows. Strange thing about this trip, so much occurs in Paris. Tennis star Guy, which is Farley Granger's character, hates his unfaithful wife. Mysterious Bruno, Robert Walker, hates his father. How perfect for a playful proposal. I'll kill yours, you'll kill mine. The thing about this movie that got me was, firstly, I love trains. So I love just watching them in the first scene of the movie when they're just sitting on the train and they're meeting each other in the dining car, having a drink. I just love watching trains on film. 1951, it's a long time ago now, but it still looked good. It still looked luxurious to me. But yes, this chance meeting, the two of them chat, and then of course they come up with this pact. It then goes on further where the Robert Walker character, Bruno, who hates his father, he thinks that the other guy is going to actually do what they plan to do for each other, and that's get rid of their trouble person in their life. Does it happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. But there's a great scene in an amusement park, really well done. A couple of scenes in the amusement park actually, and really nicely done. Also, the murder scene was really interesting from the angles, different angles that were used in the filming itself. And then just also the fact that this character, Bruno, also is very sort of definitely more on the homosexual side. And that wasn't often portrayed in movies back at that time. So it wasn't stated as being that's what he was or who he was, but the way he dressed, especially when he walked around in his nightgown in the scenes where he was at home, all of that was quite different, quite interesting. But the whole movie is great to look at, totally deserves to be in my top 5. It's my number 5 movie. Strangers on a Train from 1951. I say, the number 4 movie from 1954 is Rear Window. It's starring Grace Kelly and James Jimmy Stewart. It reads as follows. A wheelchair-bound photographer spies on his neighbours from his apartment and becomes convinced one of them has committed murder. This movie, most people know this movie. It's often in the top 3 most popular of Hitchcock movies, and also with critics. And it's because of the tension and just the way it's filmed, and it's basically all just him sitting in a room, and he's in a wheelchair, and he's got his camera out, and he's zooming in, and he's checking out the neighbours across from him. Basically all it is, but just the way that Hitchcock portrays all the characters, and you can see their lives from the outside, looking in, and then of course something happens with one of the couples, and it looks like there's a crime that's taken place, and it just goes from there. But it's just, again, camera angles, lighting, sound effects, the tension, and Jimmy Stewart. Love, love, love him. Grace Kelly too, looked amazing as always. Good chemistry between those two, and it's just a fantastic movie to watch. That's my number 4 movie. It's Rear Window from 1954. Number 3 from 1958, Vertigo, starring Kim Novak and James Jimmy Stewart. It reads as follows. A retired San Francisco detective suffering from acrophobia, the fear of heights, investigates the strange activities of an old friend's wife, all the while becoming dangerously obsessed with her. This is an absolute classic. This has recently taken over from Citizen Kane, I believe in 2002 or maybe it was 2012, as critics looking back at all the movies for the whole time that cinema has been around and voted it as the best movie of all time, number 1, ahead of now Citizen Kane. So 1958, Vertigo, it's in colour, it looks amazing, it's just a fantastic story. Kim Novak does an amazing job because she does play 2 characters. She basically plays a double, but she plays it so differently, each of the characters. And Jimmy Stewart, with the scared of heights thing, is just brilliant as always. It's got such a fantastic story. It just plays out in a fun, exciting, and a mystical way, like most of Hitchcock's movies. And of course the classic scenes that hadn't been used in cinema before too, with just some of the special effects that we used. They do look a little funny to us now with everything we have, but it really gets the point across what he's trying to tell with this story. It's a fantastic movie. The top 3 movies for me are very, very tight and close. This definitely could have been my number 1 or number 2, but it was just shaded by the other 2. So this is my number 3 movie. It's Vertigo from 1958. Number 2, 1954, Dial M for Murder, starring Grace Kelly, Ray Milland, and Robert Cummings. It reads as follows. When Playboy tennis pro Tony Wendis discovers his rich wife, Margot, is having an affair with handsome American Mark Halliday, he devises an ingenious plot to murder her. But when his scheme takes an unexpected deadly twist, Tony improvises, implicating Margot for first-degree murder in this classic spellbinder. So this movie, I love this so much. 1954, it's prompted me to actually do a little remake of it myself. I just love the script in this. I love how it's set out, the pace of it, and I love the different scenes. even though it's pretty much all filmed in one room or one apartment, the apartment in London, the camera angles they've used in this, even Hitchcock came out with a 3D version of this too. So back in 1954, there was a 3D version of Dial M for Murder. It's crazy. Now you can see where that 3D would have been used. It was the angles coming in on the brandy, coming in on the cigarettes they were smoking, the close-ups on the telephone, the view from above the apartment looking down as they were walking. The camera angle was up as they were sitting, having the cigarette, having this conversation about how to murder the wife, basically. And just the plot, what happens, how it goes wrong, and then how it finishes. It's just a fantastic story and really well done. Loved everything about it. It's my number 2 movie. Could have been number 1, but like I said, the top 3 movies are all pretty close. This was 1954's Dial M for Murder, my number 2 movie. My number 1 Hitchcock movie of all time is from 1960, Psycho. Starring Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh and Vera Miles. It reads as follows. A Phoenix secretary steals $40,000 from her employer's client, goes on the run, checks into a remote motel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. Now, what can you say about Psycho? This was a thriller, it was scary for the time, 1960, and it did things that no other movies had done before, and that was it really scared the audience, and it killed off one of its main characters, Janet Leigh, early on in the movie, which nobody saw coming. And Hitchcock was really careful about not giving this away by not showing anything like that in the trailers, and so that then everyone was talking about it afterwards. Just the scene, the shower scene, where he dresses up as his mother and does the stabbing. It's such an iconic scene. And of course, 1960 was when this movie was made, but Psycho 2 was then done in the 80s, which is actually one of my favorite movies as well, of all time. Has nothing to do with Hitchcock, except that it is basically the continuation story from 1960's Psycho. Psycho was in black and white, and the way they used the black and white and the blood situation when Janet Leigh's character was murdered in the shower was fantastic and also very iconic. So it's an amazing movie. It's got tons of suspense. The acting's great. The house is fantastic. It's just very cool, creepy, and it's a deserved number 1. My number 1 Hitchcock movie of all time is 1960's Psycho. So that's it for me. My top movies of all time from Alfred Hitchcock in a list. Now it's time to have a little brandy in the style of Alfred Hitchcock.